Welcome back, dear viewers, to our KTV2 series with another guest. Tonight, Dr. Abdulaziz Almuslem, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. It is a pleasure to host you here, Doctor, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Doctor, let's get to it. Over the decades, wars, they do influence generations and societies in several ways, whether it be in lifestyle or anything else. So if we get to the recent heinous attacks by Iran on the state of Kuwait or the GCC nations, so how do you view in your perspective, that the war of Iran and their strikes will affect our society or generations?
Okay, we can take a step back and look at how the attitude towards the parties to the conflict, the perspective on the power they have, the level of power they have, and their optimism about peace. And so taking a step back, looking at the direct parties, the direct conflicting parties are right now the United States and the Zionist entity on one hand, and then we have Iran on the other. And their attitudes towards their perception of how much power they have differ, and also their optimism about peace also differ. And so when we factor that in, we can look at the extent we believe that peace can be enabled. Regarding your question about the Gulf states, how we view ourselves, the consensus among the academics and among the strategists in general is that we should not be a party. We should not seek to escalate. The direct response right now, what we should be pursuing right now is de-escalation. We should be aware of the circumstances. We should be aware of what escalation could result in. And there is no positive coming out of escalation. And so what we want to do in terms of the Gulf states is seek de-escalation and hope for the return of our neighbor Oman, the Gulf neighbor of Oman, the Sultanate of Oman, was actively pursuing mediation. It was functioning as a mediator between the United States and the Islamic Republic of
just before
Iran.
the conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what we could hope for, what we could advocate for, is a resumption of that mediation to return to the peaceful status quo, because the peace is to our benefit. Of the universe of alternatives that we could choose from in the Gulf states, pursuing the peace is the best option, and we could advocate for that. That does not, of course, negate our rights, any country's right, according to the UN Charter, very explicitly, very clearly detailed in Article 51 of the UN Charter, a state's right to self-defense. We have the right to self-defense, we have the right to defend ourselves. But does that mean states, through the self-defense, do they seek escalation? Some people in the Western world might interpret it that way. They think self-defense enables countries to go attack other countries. But we shouldn't adopt that attitude. In the Gulf states, we can maintain, preserve our right to defend ourselves, but at the same time, pursue de-escalation and hope for a return to the peaceful status quo.
But the Article 51, we are abiding by it to self-defend our nations.
Exactly.
And what are you trying to say about the Sultanate of Oman? That what you were trying to say is that Oman could be also the middleman in the negotiations for the GCC states with Iran, or were you referring only to the previous conflict, before the conflict between the US and Iran?
It's related to the reason for resorting to the conflict. It was initiated, let's be very clear, by the United States with support from the Zionist entity. They were really advocating for it. There was a peace treaty. There was an agreement between the United States and Iran regarding the inspection of the nuclear facilities, which was, I believe, agreed to back in 2018 or 2016. I don't remember the exact year, but there was an agreement regarding the nuclear program there.
Yeah.
And the recent regime, the Trump administration, decided to withdraw from that treaty. They ripped it up, and they started claiming that Iran will be creating creating this threat, and that threat would warrant them intervening and launching strikes against the Iranian regime. And so when it comes to the mediation, the Omani mediation, it's an attempt by us, by the Gulf states, by the Sultanate of Oman specifically, to return to having the dialogue, having the discussion between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States to avoid using the threat of the use of force. And let me be very clear here. The UN Charter in Article 2, Paragraph 4, Article 2, Paragraph 4 explicitly states that states shall not use not only force against other states, but they shouldn't even threaten to use force. Not only the use of force, but the threat is not allowed, according to the UN Charter. It's very explicitly stated. And so when we have the law is there, and it's all, the UN Charter is there, and we could pursue resolving the current tensions, the current escalation, through the current UN Charter, the multilateral treaty. Perhaps the most important multilateral treaty we have today is the UN Charter. And so when we use that as our frame of reference to de-escalate, to return to the peaceful status quo, I think that's our best bet on seeking or enabling the resumption of the peaceful political dynamic in this region.
And since you're speaking of negotiations, since before we move to questions locally, since you were speaking of negotiations, do you think, or do you agree with observers who were saying that it got difficult after what happened, that during negotiations Iran got hit, so it's more difficult now to get back on the table?
It's more difficult to get back on the table now?
To negotiate, especially after they were hit during the times of negotiations. Do you agree with that?
There was a recent Wall Street Journal article that talked about the current Trump administration's policy regarding conducting international politics, and it's quite concerning actually, because they mentioned how they seek to, whenever there is a regime they don't agree with, and so we can reference Venezuela here, they would go seek to remove the leader, and so they'd not necessarily launch a full-scale war on the ground, but simply remove, I think the title of that Wall Street Journal article, I forgot who wrote it, but it was quite recent, removing the leadership. And so if we look at what they did recently, they did attack the leadership of Iran. They're not launching a full-scale war. They don't have a ground invasion as of now. And hopefully that doesn't happen. But they have assassinated the political leaders. They have assassinated important military figures, the political leaders. And in that article, they mentioned how they're hoping that the public and the new leadership would be aligned, their political inclinations would be aligned with the inclinations of the American leadership. That seems to have worked in Venezuela. The new political leadership in Venezuela seems to be getting along with the American attitude towards international politics. I don't think they'll be able to succeed in Iran. And so I think the best hope right now is to, number one, seek de-escalation. Number two, ensure the safe passage of oil in the region. That's not going to secure our
paralyzed ships.
Exactly.
They have to be safe
in the Strait of Hormuz. Exactly. We need to secure that, which is in America's interest as well. And so we could focus on the common interests between both the United States, us, the Gulf states, and the Islamic Republic of Iran to resume the peaceful dynamic in this region.
So most important things now is the safe passage, which comes second, and first one is de-escalation, especially for us. So now if we go locally, and our government has done tremendous effort, far beyond expectations, in response to the conflict. So in response to the evolving conflict and everything that has happened, the Kuwaiti cabinet has decided to monitor local and regional development, let's say by the clock or through permanent sessions. Okay, and we've seen that. So how do you look at that, from which perspective, and how do you evaluate the efforts exerted locally?
So I actually haven't done any formal research. I haven't conducted any field research, but I can give you my general impression based on my interaction with colleagues, with friends, with family, with what I've been seeing on the media. And there was an initial, when the conflict first started, there was an initial sense of panic. People were worried. But through the consistent signaling, through the media channels, through even on social media, the calmness quickly spread in Kuwait. And so to the extent that sometimes I talk to people and they forget that there are tensions and going on around us, that we are subject to certain attacks from a neighboring country, which is a red line. We know this is our country, we have to protect it. But the initial panic that I think Kuwaitis were feeling has disappeared, and a sense of calmness has gradually come back. We're still listening to the sirens. I think there was one actually today that I heard.
Just one earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but overall, I sense that the Kuwaiti, the residents in Kuwait, irrespective of whether they're Kuwaiti or non-Kuwaiti, they're feeling calmer now, given the responsiveness of the security forces, the armed forces, the firefighters, and even the media, the media channels. They're sending consistent signals that things are under control and that there's no need to panic. We should be vigilant, we should be aware, but panicking is not going to help anyone.
So you have also noticed the role of media now that has been in terms of delivering short, precise and accurate information.
Definitely.
Yeah. And now we'll get back to more questions and elaborative answers from you, but let us take a quick break and come back to you, Doctor.
في ظل الأوضاع الراهنة معكم اليوم وزارة التجارة والصناعة المعنية في ملف الأمن الغذائي. اليوم نطمنكم بأن الوضع التمويني مستقر تماما ولا يوجد أي نقص في المواد الغذائية الأساسية. كذلك حركة الأسواق طبيعية والسلع متوفرة في نقاط البيع والمخازن بشكل منتظم. إنتاج المياه في المصانع المحلية مستمر على مدار الساعة لضمان تلبية احتياجات الجميع. سلاسل الإمداد تعمل بشكل طبيعي وسلس ولا توجد أي عوائق في تدفق السلع إلى الأسواق، كما أن الأسواق المركزية وجميع نقاط البيع تعمل بشكل طبيعي، والجمعيات التعاونية تواصل نشاطها المعتاد دون أي تأثير. ونؤكد على الجاهزية الكاملة لخطط الطوارئ مع استمرار فرق الرقابة التجارية في متابعة الأسواق ميدانيا بشكل يومي لضمان استقرار الأسعار وتوفر السلع الأساسية فيها. لذلك اليوم احنا نطمنكم ونبشركم بأن الأمور طيبة إن شاء الله ويحافظ الله.
Since the first signs of the current situation, the Ministry of Health has activated its emergency health plans and raised readiness levels across all healthcare facilities. According to the Ministry of Health's official spokesperson, Dr. Abdullah Sanad, Kuwait's health system is operating at full capacity and readiness, coordinating across the country's network of public institutions. Sanad said that Health Operations Room is working around the clock to monitor the developments and coordinate medical responses.
In response to the series of Iranian missile and drone attacks starting in late February 2026, the Ministry of Health has activated emergency protocols to manage casualties and ensure the continuity of medical services. The ministry has been in a state of continuous vigilance and high readiness to treat individuals injured by falling shrapnel and debris from intercepted threats. Emergency departments at Al-Adan Hospital and Al-Jahra Hospital were designated to receive initial casualties, while patients requiring advanced medical intervention have been transferred to Jabr Hospital. Meanwhile, the surgical teams at Al-Adan Hospital were placed on high alert, with several urgent surgeries performed on patients with trauma from shrapnel and fractures. As for the triage guidance, the ministry has urged the public to visit primary health care centers for non-urgent cases to keep hospital emergency rooms clear for critical injuries. To support the sudden increase in medical demand, the ministry has secured essential supplies, affirming that the strategic reserve of blood and blood components is maintained as safe levels. The ministry also stressed that emergency plans for the central administration of blood transfusion were activated, including extending hours at donation centers, which collected over 2,000 units in early March. Regarding the medical supplies, the ministry announced that operational plans are in place to ensure an uninterrupted supply of medications and medical equipment across all facilities. On the other hand, the ministry has implemented several administrative and safety measures to protect patients and staff, mainly the enhanced security in which public hospitals have enforced stricter visitor policies, including a maximum of 2 visitors per patient, mandatory screening, and 24/7 CCTV monitoring. The ministry noted that outpatient clinics continue to operate and medications are being dispensed according to the scheduled appointments to maintain routine care alongside the emergency response. Meanwhile, authorities are emphasizing mental health, providing guidance on coping with the stress and trauma caused by air raid sirens and regional instability. Amid intensive efforts, the Ministry of Health maintains direct 24-hour coordination with other government bodies, including the Kuwait Ministry of Defense and the Cabinet, to integrate decision-making during the crisis. For his part, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Abdullah Sened, held several meetings and briefings to provide updates on the nation's healthcare system, including emergency preparedness, public health campaigns, and the introduction of digital health services. Dr. Sened has emphasized that the Kuwaiti healthcare system is operating at full capacity, with 7 public hospitals, 14 specialized centers, and 118 primary healthcare centers on high alert. He has reported on the coordination of emergency and intensive care units, ensuring a stable 49% occupancy rate in the hospitals, and managing a steady supply of blood units. The spokesperson has promoted the launch of the Salim app, which enables citizens and residents to securely book appointments and access health records, replacing the previous Sahha app.
And viewers, we are back here in the studio with our special guest right here, Dr. Abdulaziz. We're back, and we need to focus now more on the local before we get to the regional segment. Doctor, on the occasion of the last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan, His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Mish'al al-Ahmad al-Jaber al-Sabah, may Allah protect and bless him, has emphasized the importance of unity and vigilance during the times and the circumstances the state of Kuwait is going through. How do you read the noble directives by His Highness the Emir?
The noble directives by His Highness the Emir are very wise, and I recall watching it. It was in Arabic, and you mentioned unity and vigilance, but there was also a third, the first point he mentioned, which was al-wa'i, or awareness. And awareness is extremely important in these circumstances. They're important at both the individual level, at the administrative level, at all levels, especially when the stakes are high. And I usually tell my students whenever I cover public policy, whenever I cover game theory in my classes, that even when you're presented with different alternatives that are all negative, through awareness you'll be able to organize the alternatives in front of you, even if they're all bad, in terms of the least bad to the most bad. And so you could pick the rational outcome. The point of being aware, the first point is to pursue to end up with the rational outcome, which is the optimal outcome, the beneficial outcome. And
now, Doctor, if we look at the regional matter, the Arab League has condemned the Iranian attacks, the heinous Iranian attacks and missiles on the GCC nations, and called them a massive strategic error and a violation of the sovereignty. So how important is it to unify the political stances among the Arab states?
It's important. It's not always the case that you have unity. I mean, if we look back at the history of Kuwait back in 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we had a resolution at the UN Security Council. It was resolution number 678. And there were some Arab states in the UN Security Council that refused to endorse the activation of Chapter 7 for the liberation of Kuwait. And so, although unity is desired, it would present a positive front showing that we're all on the same page, we're seeking the same outcome, and it's important, it would benefit us. Sometimes we won't end up having that. So what's important is just to maintain the general trend, having most of the Arab states, hopefully the crushing majority, maintain a unified stance towards the aggression and condemn it for the violation of our territories. The state of Kuwait, it has been made clear that it is not allowing foreign governments to use our land, our air, or sea for the launching of attacks. So we're not allowing any country to use our territory to launch attacks against another country.
And we're not even a party.
We're not a party to the conflict. And so having other states attack us is unjustified. And like we mentioned earlier in the interview, Kuwait has a right to defend itself according to Article 51 of the UN Charter. No state should violate the UN Charter by, if we refer back to the two articles I want to refer to frequently in this interview, are 2.4, Article 2, Paragraph 4, and Article 51, states should not be violating 2.4. They should be respecting the sovereignty of other states. They should be cooperating and pursuing the peace and good neighborly relations with the other states around them.
But Doctor, let's stay on this question for a little bit more. If you could tell me also the importance, since we're speaking about the unity of Arab countries, doesn't it help through the international institutions that we have more in our stance as well, in line with our stance, for example, through the international organizations, whether be it the UN and whether be it the Security Council, in terms of the voting that happens or anything like that? It does help, right? Even internationally.
Certainly, certainly. Having a unified stance in any situation will send, at the end, it's all about the signaling. The signal we transmit to other entities, other groups. And so when we communicate a signal, when we try to communicate a message, and it's apparent that there is no consensus among us, that there is a huge division, that signal will not be as powerful. But when there is a widespread consensus, when we have 90% of the Arab League or 100% of the Arab League maintain a certain position, that signal, when it's transmitted, when it's sent to the other international groups, they will say that the Arab bloc has made its stance clear, it's made its position clear, and that would help us, it would make us look more confident about where we stand, and that there is unity in that regard, which would help consolidate whatever it is we're trying to communicate.
Exactly, and this is where unity plays its role.
Yes.
Yeah, and from an international legal perspective, Doctor, from an international legal perspective, how would the parties to the conflict view this kind of escalation and developments?
So that's a big question. And so we refer to the UN Charter, we refer to Article 2, Paragraph 4, we refer to Article 51 about self-defense. Unfortunately, we're getting certain signals from the United States showing that they're willing to abrogate these basics, certain aspects of the UN Charter, many aspects of the UN Charter actually. There was a recent interview by the American ambassador to the Zionist entity, Mike Huckabee, where he was presented with a map of what's known as an expanded, the Greater Israel, and he said that he doesn't have a problem with that, which has major implications for what they think of the Charter, what they think of Article 2.4. And so some students, some spectators might think that this means that international law is dead. They might think that international law is no longer, which is not necessarily the case. When there is no international law to apply, that's in the Latin phrases, it's called a lacuna, that there is an empty space and we don't know how to fill it. But that's not necessarily the case. We have to be clear. What the United States and the Zionist entity might be pursuing is a return to an older version of international law. And so the entire international community, the European states, the Arab states, the Africans, the Asians, the Latin Americans, might be pursuing the current charter, the current norms. They might be embracing the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, the International Bill of Human Rights, thinking that these are the norms that you want to subscribe to. But the United States is the most powerful country in the world in terms of economy, military, and so on. And they seem to be signaling their readiness to embrace an older version of international law, which is the colonial version. The colonial version of international law viewed the world in terms of civilized and barbaric people, civilized and savage people, and that the norms of treating the others, the idea of sovereign equality, which is also mentioned in the UN Charter, doesn't exist. They would treat the other group as someone who is beneath them that they could conquer. And so when the ambassador, the US ambassador to Israel, was presented with that map of a greater Zionist entity, and he said he does not have a problem with that, that's reminiscent of that colonial version of international law, where the Europeans would go expand into different territories and imagine them as terra, it's a Latin phrase as well, it's called terra nullius, which is territory with no people. Although there are people here, we are people in Kuwait, we are people in Saudi, Lebanon, the Palestinian territories. There are people living there, but they want to imagine it as empty space that they can take over.
That's clear. Doctor, I want to spend a little bit more time on this, and I'll get back to you, but let us take our correspondent, Mohammed Sawagh, who's on field right now. Now, before we continue our discussion with our guest in the studio, let's switch to the live stream with our correspondent, Mohammed Sawagh, right now. Mohammed Sawagh, if you are listening to me, tell us the latest updates you have.
Yes, Abdulrahman, I'm listening to you. Thank you very much for having me. And I would like to say that I'm here in Shuwaykh industrial area where all the business are running smoothly and normal. According to the people who's working here. Business are normal, and most of the people are shopping for Eid, preparing for Eid al-Fitr. And some of the business owners, they told me that in this year it have something special, which is like most of the sellings are being through the online applications and websites. I've seen some officials, government officials are running around the market to check about the prices and the goods if there is anything missing. And I've seen the police, traffic police, they are here to organize the traffic roads.
Mohammed Al-Sawagh, the area seems busy from where you are. So what have you witnessed exactly? What are people doing at your area? Is it shopping mostly?
Well, I have been witnessing the people here doing their normal shopping, and I've seen people going to the coffee shop, restaurants, and some people here are buying buying foods and buying some goods for their houses.
And Mohammed, the same question usually ask you, since you are one of the also most active on-field reporters and have also visited many places. So what message would you give to the public, since you have seen several places in the state of Kuwait?
Yes, I would like to tell the people, according to what I have seen through my field reporting, that everything is under control. Life in here are normally, and people should get their information from the official sources and stay calm.
And Mohammed, before we let you go, when you are right now at your scene, you haven't noticed any unusual activity of the people. They're acting very normal, in opposition to the rumors that are out there, right?
Nothing is unusual here. Everything is normal. People are living their life normally, and it's another day in Ramadan. Just people are preparing for Eid al-Fitr.
Mohammed Al-Sawagh, be safe, and thank you for the latest updates. A quick break and we will be back. As part of the state's efforts to grant flexibility for schools, students and teachers during the current regional crisis, the Ministry of Education adopted a number of decisions, including shifting to online learning while postponing exams until further notice. Minister of Education Sayyid Jalal Al-Tabtabai emphasized that these efforts reflect a sense of responsibility and a commitment to our students' well-being.
In response to rising regional tensions and attacks involving Iran, the Ministry of Education implemented several measures to ensure the safety of students and staff, starting with shifting to online learning, in which all public and private schools as well as universities, including Kuwait University and Abdullah Salim University, transitioned to remote learning via Microsoft Teams until further notice, due to the current regional crisis. The ministry emphasized the importance of students and teachers attending and participating in classes via the Teams platform, and stressed the necessity of continued monitoring by school administrations to ensure the desired educational benefits are achieved during the distance learning period. Postponement of exams is another measure that the ministry took, in which all short exams and quizzes will be suspended until further notice. As for operational procedures, the ministry decided that school days were scheduled to begin at 9:30 a.m., in line with the timings of the holy month of Ramadan, with lessons lasting 25 minutes during the remote learning period. Regarding the staff reductions, the ministry decided to reduce the staff in education-related departments in conjunction with other government bodies. As part of its safety plan, the ministry has activated field emergency plans and prepared for 90 shelter centers supervised by civil defense teams. The ministry stated that the situation will be reassessed in the coming period, stressing that the decisions are made in favor of the students and to maintain the stability of the educational process. For his part, Minister of Education Sayyid Jalal At-Tabtabai chaired several meetings with a host of senior officials at the ministry to discuss the emergency plan, while listening to a detailed explanation of the distance learning mechanism, the level of interaction in virtual classes, and the attendance rates of students and teachers on the educational platform, in addition to the challenges that some schools may face and the mechanisms for addressing them to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of the educational process. The Minister of Education commended the significant roles of the staff across all sectors of the ministry and praised the roles of teaching and administrative staff as well as school administrations in monitoring students and ensuring the continuity of their studies despite the challenges. The minister emphasized that these efforts reflect a sense of responsibility and a commitment to our students' well-being. Minister At-Tabtabai also acknowledged the important role of parents in supporting their children during the implementation of the distance learning system, calling for continued cooperation between families and schools to enhance student discipline, academic progress, and optimal educational outcomes.
Dear viewers, we are back and we have breaking news by the civil aviation which announces that drone targeted Kuwait International Airport, sadly. But thankfully, alhamdulillah, there is no casualty reported. And for now, always listen to the official sources and do not panic. Always listen to the official statements, and may God protect the state of Kuwait. And now, dear viewers, let us continue our discussion with Dr. Abdulaziz Almuslem here at our studio. Doctor, welcome back again. So, Doctor, we'll get to the question or the discussion we were having. As I told you, we'd like to spend more time on it, where you were telling me how they were, the US and Israeli occupation would like to get back to the traditional way, the colonial way, or the way you named it.
Yep.
So, I wanted to mention something and out of your curiosity. So how do you think with the switch that we had post 1990 between from geopolitics to geoeconomics, so the classical way of seeking military war by land, for example, to having economic sanctions and stuff like that, do you think it's possible, as you were saying, that they go back to the traditional ways?
To revive, is it possible for us to revive the strength of the UN Charter? I think it's very, very possible. I think it's very possible for us to return to ensuring that the multilateral treaties like the UN Charter, and there is another important multilateral treaty that we can mention here, which is the Rome Statute. But we've noticed some states right now willing to assail them. We've mentioned how the United States and the Zionist entity are willing to, let's say, undermine the UN Charter. We've also seen some states with the Rome Statute, which is a criminal court, an international criminal court, that would prosecute people that are responsible for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression.
Like we've seen with Netanyahu.
Exactly, and so he's wanted by the ICC. And what's fascinating is that when the arrest warrant was issued, for Netanyahu, there was an obligation for the member states of the Rome Statute to arrest this wanted person and send him to trial, to have him be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. What became fascinating was that many European states, when that person, Milikowski or Netanyahu, who's landed in some European states like Hungary, for example, they refused to abide by the terms of the treaty. Article 59, I believe it's 59.1 of the Rome Statute. You can look it up. The viewer can look it up. There's an obligation for the member state to apprehend the person that's wanted and send him for trial. When they knew that they had that obligation towards that person, they said, actually, he's our ally. We don't want to apply that term to our ally. They seem to be willing to apply it to Arab leaders, African leaders, Asian leaders, someone who's not European, but they don't want to apply it to someone they consider an ally. Now, to answer your question, is it possible to go back to upholding the rule of law, the plain meaning of the law, with the appropriate intentions, the proper intentions in our interpretation of the law? The answer is yes, very easily yes. But it depends on the politics of the powerful states. Right now, it's the United States. There is a huge Zionist influence on the US Congress, on the executive branch as well. There's a website, a fantastic website called apactracker.com, and it shows you that over 70 or 75% of the US Congress and the House of Representatives, the lower house, is receiving aid from or receiving money from that pressure group, from that lobby. And over, I think, 90% of the Senate, Majlis Shuyukh, is receiving money from that lobby. And so with this influence, this Zionist influence on the world's most powerful state, we'll find that there is a willingness to abandon these international conventions, abandon perhaps the most important one for the occupied Palestinian territories is Geneva 4, Article 49(6) of Geneva 4, 49 paragraph 6. It says that the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its civilian population into the territory it occupies. Now, the Zionist entity has been doing this for the past, since day one of its existence. It takes its people and sends it to the territory it occupies. They want to displace, they want to remove the original inhabitants and bring in a new people, which is classic colonialism, classic settler colonialism. It's the same thing the Americans did with the Native Americans, what the British did with people in New Zealand and Australia and so on. So is it possible to go back to the proper interpretation of the UN Charter, of the Hague Conventions, of the Geneva Conventions? The answer is yes, but we need the proper leadership. We need the country at the top of the power pyramid to keep sending the signals, just as any authority, the Kuwaiti authorities, the GCC authorities, the Arab authorities, send signals to their people to provide reassurance, just as how we mentioned earlier in the interview, people on day one were feeling a sense of panic, but then they calmed down after there was constant reassurance from the authorities that things are under control and that panic will not help anyone. The same thing applies at the international level. When the world's most powerful state indicates that it's willing to abandon the humanitarian law, willing to abandon the genuine interpretation, the decent interpretation of Article 2.4 and Article 51, only through that proper interpretation would we, or not we, but the rest of the world would feel that we can stick to the plain meaning of those conventions and apply them the way they were meant to be applied. Yeah.
And now moving from the detailed explanation you have given us around the international institutions and US and Israeli occupation, back to the Gulf, Doctor. Lots of observers have been discussing the topic of whether or not it is in the interest of the GCC is to respond or get into as a party to this war. What is your take on that?
It's a categorical no, plain and simple no. This no does not mean that we don't have a right to defend ourselves. It means that we, as you just mentioned right now, there was an attack on Kuwait airport, I think you just mentioned.
Radars.
On the
radars,
on the radars.
So, civil aviation, on the radars of Kuwait airport.
So the Gulf states, Kuwait, all the Gulf states, any country has the right to defend itself against any incoming attack. Now, does that mean that we want to seek an escalation, seek the deterioration? If there is a path, there is an option in front of us where we can try and revive the diplomatic communication to de-escalate and reassure the party that thinks that things are going to continue deteriorating, reassure them that that's not necessarily the case. We might be able to revive the peace and maintain a strong, consolidated peace if we can simply communicate that to them and have the initial, this conflict, let's be clear, was provoked by the United States. Have the initial provoker also jump on this.
Alongside the Israeli occupation.
Sorry, say that again?
I mean, you would say alongside the Israeli occupation.
Alongside Israeli, it's interconnected. It's interconnected. Like I mentioned, the Zionist entity, through its lobby, through its pressure, now openly, it's all documented. This is not speculation, by the way. Like I mentioned earlier, on APAC Tracker, you'll be able to document, no speculation at all, how the money is influencing these decisions on the US Congress, on the executive branch. And so if we're simply able to have the United States jump on the idea that this conflict is not to their benefits, show them that the skyrocketing oil prices will not benefit them. The American citizen does not want to pay more at the gas pump, and show them that by de-escalating, all the parties will benefit, all the parties will be happier. The only party that might not be happier is the Zionist entity. For some reason, they like seeing conflict, they like violating basic rights of the others that they, according to the colonial logic, they consider barbarians or savages. Today's term, they've replaced barbarian and savage with the term terrorist. Although some people can objectively be classified as terrorist, they seem to be willing to use it more broadly, even when there is a group that simply wants to live. The people in the occupied Palestinian territories, many of them just want to have a normal life. They want to live in their home, on their farm, and live a normal life. But the Zionist entity is saying that no, we will violate Article 49, Paragraph 6 of the Geneva Convention, Geneva 4, and remove you from this land in hope of bringing in a European person to replace a European Jew to replace you. And so when there is a widespread consensus that this is something that we're not willing to accept, that we want to stick to the International Bill of Human Rights, we want to accept and embrace the notion of sovereign equality, of respect of international law as applied in the modern period, not in the colonial period, because the colonial period doesn't serve us. In the colonial period, we had the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, right? And that we want to abandon that and embrace the new norms that would secure more justice, more fairness, even for states that are not at the top of the power pyramid.
So just to make it clear, an answer to this question, a categorical no to contribution
to escalation.
To escalation, yeah.
To escalation,
you
yes.
have been calling for de-escalation.
Exactly.
Since the beginning. So Doctor, now moving, I mean, as we have heard earlier, we had a report on the Ministry of Education and its efforts. So the Ministry of Education, Doctor, if we speak a little bit more locally now, has done several or took temporary precautionary measures like suspending exams or doing online learning just for the coming period at least until further notice to maintain the safety of everyone. So what is the impact of the current circumstances on students and academic staff, and what do you think of such precautionary measures?
I think they're suitable measures, and the transfer to or the switch to online learning is not new. We've experienced it before during the COVID pandemic.
COVID-19.
And both, I think, the teachers and maybe a smaller portion of the students are already familiar with using the program of Microsoft Teams. They're already familiar with getting assignments through that programs. And so if we want to be optimistic about this, we can say that the academics, the teachers, are hitting the ground running. They've well experienced. They know how to deal with this. They know how to take attendance using that program.
They've been there.
They've been there.
Yeah.
As to put it quite simply, they've been there. And some of the students, many of them have graduated because COVID time flies. You know, it was what now 6 years ago.
A few years ago.
Yeah, and some of them, so many of them have graduated, but some of them might still be remember from their experience with the COVID teaching online. In general, the online teaching will not be able, as an academic, the academic will not be able to communicate the information to the student as well when it's through online. It's still a great alternative, given the current circumstances, given the emergency that the state is experiencing and the Gulf is experiencing. But the direct teaching, having the classroom, having the student in front of you, making eye contact with them, and calling out on them, or calling them out and having them answer the question that you have in mind will ultimately result in more awareness. And they've done studies on this. There is a fantastic study done by MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that attached, I forget what the entire name is called. It's called EEG scans. EEG, I forget what EEG stands for. But they basically look at the electric signals going on in the student's brain when they're relying on simply online learning and when they're using artificial intelligence to answer homeworks and write their papers. Because when it's distance learning, they might be more inclined to use the chat GPT or the large language modules and let's say depend on that more than depending on themselves. Now, they've discovered through that study that the electric signals in the brain have decreased when they're depending on those large language modules. But when the student is in front of me in the classroom and I'm calling his name out and I'm asking him to answer the question on the board, he doesn't have time to open up the program and seek an answer. He'll have to depend on himself, depend on the extent he's understood the matter. And so there will be more electric signals in the brain going on. So in terms of knowledge accumulation, in terms of knowledge competition, in terms of ending up with better results, the regular in-class environment is better than the online, but still the online is a fantastic alternative, and I think that both the academics and the students are very happy to, like you said, we've been there before, to hit the ground running. They know how to do this.
But Doctor, as an academic and assistant professor at KU, don't you think that the online is, from your perspective, of course, don't you think that the online teaching is better for the professors or assistant professors at KU than teachers who teach at schools, in a sense that the students who are doing academic stuff, for example, humanities studies or some things like that, it's more inclined to self-reliance, self-study than actually in schools. Do you agree with that, or how do you see it?
I'm going to say no. I do believe that having the student in front of the teacher, having the teacher be able to see if the student is willing to respond to a question and see the extent he's willing to think critically beyond the readings. Because what I want to do as an academic is we assign readings. We want to make sure that the student has looked up the material we're covering for the class. And the extent the student is able to build on that, show me that they've mastered these readings, that they've understood them, and the extent they're able to think critically on how it relates to a current problem. Because these readings have all been written in the past. And so they can tie what's been discussed, a writing by, for example, a colonial author, and how it's relevant to the present day, to explain the current dynamic between the settlers and the occupied people in the occupied Palestinian territories. I want to see how he can use that. Now, if it's online,
you want to see how they have approached it,
how they're confident, how they're able to think on their feet, how they're able to show me they're willing to think critically. This is all very important, especially since I'm actually writing a paper right now looking at standardized test scores for different groups, looking at what's known as the Graduate Record Examination, the GRE. And unfortunately, when we do a scatter plot looking at the GDP per capita and the GRE score, there is a clear positive trend. The wealthier a country is, the better the score is, except for a cluster of states, very wealthy but perform very poorly, which is the Gulf Cooperation Council states. We have great money, we have great resources in terms of finances, but unfortunately that hasn't reflected on our ability to achieve the appropriate, the competitive test scores, which makes me feel a little upset. I wish that when I look at the Kuwaiti youth, the high schoolers, the university graduates, and when I put them in a competition, an international competition, that we're going to be at least average or above average. But unfortunately, right now, we're actually a little bit underperforming. And that's why I think that ensuring the quality in education will help us in Kuwait achieve one of the objectives, one of Kuwait's objectives, one of the Gulf Cooperation Council's objectives, which is having a knowledge-based economy. We don't want to have an economy that's simply based on the export of oil resources. We want a knowledge-based economy. And if the student is relying on the distance, on having the education be online, and then they resort to all the questions to answer on a large language model, it's going to be very difficult to think that that future generation will help us transition to a knowledge-based economy.
Yeah, that's clear. Well, that's actually clear for the online learning, Doctor, and the precautionary measures that the Ministry of Education has taken. And now, Doctor, if we go back to the topic of the war in Iran, as we are still in this topic, the war is not only affecting the Iranians, as we know, it's also affecting and having big risks and threats on the whole region, including GCC states, Lebanon, and of course Jordan and other countries, and the Palestinian occupied territories. Would you tell us more on that?
So yeah, we can tie this back to the security of the area. I mentioned earlier in the interview this idea that the Zionist entity seeks to expand the map of Greater Israel that's been shared in the media, and that the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, has discussed with a TV personality, I think his name is Tucker Carlson. They discussed this greater map, and the ambassador said, I don't mind. And he referenced holy text. He referenced biblical and maybe the Torah, talking about how this is guaranteed, this is God's land for the chosen people, according to his perspective. So what this means for us is that thankfully we have the international statutes, like I mentioned. We have all these multilateral treaties, and the sources of international law. There are 4 sources mentioned in the ICJ statute, but the 2 main ones, the 2 main sources of international law, are treaties and custom. And so right now I've mentioned a lot of treaties. I've mentioned the Charter, the Rome Statute, the International Bill of Human Rights, the Hague Convention, the Geneva Convention. But there's also another important source of international law, which is customary international law. And the customary international law can help us remind, and not only through our reference to the statutes, but also the custom, remind those willing to violate the current norms that this is unacceptable. This expansionary settler colonial project, this escalation in the region, what the United States and the Zionist entity might try to do is persuade other countries that they're attacking Iran through Article 51, which is a very fascinating twist. They would say that we're not violating the Charter, but we're defending ourselves through Article 51, because Article 51 talks about self-defense.
Yes.
They say we're attacking Iran using 51 because of self-defense.
Yes.
And so this is a very peculiar interpretation of Article 51. But through custom, we'll be able to let those states willing to, let's say, pervert the law, that your interpretation might not be the appropriate one. We should continue seeking diplomatic, peaceful approaches to any disagreement that we have, and return to the peaceful status quo.
And Doctor, now let's move to the strikes, the heinous strikes by Iranians on us, the GCC states, 6 GCC states. They claim that the aim was to, whether be it pressure the US as they're hitting their bases in the Gulf, which is not the situation as we are seeing right now. It's gone beyond that. So could you tell us, from your perspective, about the strikes that have been happening on the GCC exactly, since we are not in the party and we have not even done anything, we're just self-defending? And also if you could tell us what miscalculation Iran have gone through.
Sure. I can maybe tell you about it more generally. I haven't looked into the details, but they are totally unjustified. Attacking the civilian infrastructure, it's a clear violation of the international humanitarian law. Kuwait has made it clear, like I mentioned earlier, that we're not allowing any foreign entity to launch attacks against Iran, so they can't claim self-defense. They shouldn't be attacking places in Kuwait City. They shouldn't be attacking residential areas. They shouldn't be launching all these drones and missiles against the Gulf states. And so this is unjustifiable, and these, like I mentioned, the Gulf states have a right to defend themselves against these attacks. And what we can do is remind the Islamic Republic of Iran that Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, again, this is the key message I want to communicate in this interview, is that Article 2.4 is very important given the current dynamics, current escalation in the area. Article 2.4 should not be violated. Neighboring states should not be using force against other states, and they should not even threaten to use force against other states. And so if there is a disagreement, they can try and resolve it diplomatically through diplomatic channels. And if they have a disagreement with the United States or the Zionist entity, they can sort it out through whatever means they consider necessary. But it should be, again, remind them that we are not a part of this conflict. We are not engaging in this conflict. We haven't allowed any foreign entity to launch the strikes. According to official channels, I believe it's been made clear by the Kuwaiti authorities that we're not allowing anyone to launch attacks from our land, sea or air against them. If it was a different scenario, if it was a different case, the Iranians would say we have justification to respond. But as of now, the official message is that we're not enabling any attack from our territories, and therefore they should not be attacking the Gulf states, given that we're not enabling attacks from our territories.
That's clear, Doctor. Thank you for the elaborative answer. We'll get a short break and come back to you.
الثقة فهي الأساس الذي تقوم عليه قوة الدولة، الثقة بين القيادة والشعب وبمؤسسات الدولة وأجهزتها، وإن وحدتنا الوطنية هي خط الدفاع الأول، وتماسكنا هو الضمان الحقيقي في هذه الأوقات لمواجهة التحديات وتجاوز الأزمات.
Remains in a state of precarious limbo, and the initiation of a broader conflict between the United States, the Israeli occupation, and Iran on February 28th has effectively paused critical negotiations regarding US President Donald Trump's peace plan. While the Board of Peace initiative designed to oversee the reconstruction and governing of post-war Gaza has moved into early implementation with project tenders for refugee villages and international troop base, the top-level diplomatic efforts to finalize the disarmament of Hamas have stalled. Here's the story.